Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're getting philosophical.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. Today we're going to be exploring that age-old question of like, what does it really mean to know something?
Yeah.
And we've got some pretty fascinating philosophical writings to kind of be our guide on this journey.
And they're going to help us out.
Exactly. And get ready for a twist because we're going to be tackling something called the Gettier problem.
Oh, I love this problem.
Yeah, I mean, it really throws a wrench into how we think about like what knowledge actually is.
I think what's so interesting about this whole topic is that it's not just some, abstract thought experiment or something.
Right.
It actually really impacts how we make decisions and understand information
Yeah.
and even how we see the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kick things off, I think we got to lay the groundwork with like the OG knowledge guru himself, Plato.
Yes, Plato.
This guy, he gave us this super influential model of knowledge, this idea that true knowledge, real knowledge, is something called justified true belief.
Justified true belief.
Sounds simple enough,
Maybe.
but it's actually the bedrock of so much thinking about knowledge.
It really is.
Okay, so let's break down justified true belief for a second.
Okay.
So Plato basically said, for you to actually know something, it can't just be some random thought just like floating around in your head.
Right.
It needs like 3 key ingredients.
3 parts to the recipe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the first one is belief.
Okay. So that's our starting point.
Yeah, you actually hold something to be true. That's the first part.
Like you got to at least believe it, right?
You got to believe it, yeah.
Oh.
Second, that belief can't just be wishful thinking.
Right.
It has to actually be true in reality.
It can't just be something you made up.
Exactly. No matter how much I might believe that I can fly, sadly, that doesn't make it knowledgeable.
Doesn't mean you can actually do it.
I know. I keep trying.
And then there's the third part, and this is really, I think, where the juice is.
Yeah.
That's justification. So you need to have good reasons for holding that belief.
It can't just be a guess.
Not just a guess, not just a hunch.
Right.
You got to have some backup.
So, okay, let's say I believe that the Earth is round, which thankfully it is.
Yes.
That belief is true. But to make it knowledge, I need more than just taking someone's word for it.
Right.
I need like evidence and scientific observations, all that good stuff.
The data, the receipts.
I gotta have the receipts, yeah. So that's what makes it justified, having reasons for my belief.
What makes it more than just like a lucky guess.
Right, exactly. And for a long time, this whole justified true belief thing seemed pretty solid, like a pretty good model.
People were pretty happy with it.
Yeah, it made sense. Until this guy, Edmund Gettier, came along
Dun, dun, dun.
in 1963.
Yeah.
And he was like, hold on a minute, there's more to this story.
A little bit more to this.
Yeah. Gettier basically showed that you can have all 3 of those things that Plato laid out. So you can have belief, you can have truth,
All 3.
and you can have justification, but still not have like real knowledge.
Right.
How's that even possible?
That's the mind-blowing part.
Yeah. I'm already feeling like my brain's bending a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good way. So basically, he introduced this really fascinating concept called epistemic luck.
Epistemic luck.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're basically like you might stumble upon a true belief, and you might even have what seems like good justification,
Oh, okay.
but it's purely by chance, not because of any reliable reasoning.
So wait, I could have my logic all lined up, my conclusion is true, but if I got there by sheer luck, it's not actually knowledge.
It might feel like knowledge,
Yeah.
but it's not, technically.
Oh, okay.
So think of it kind of like winning the lottery.
Yeah, okay.
So you might believe you're going to win,
Right.
but was your justification based on any actual evidence?
Probably not.
No, probably more like hope. Right. So you got lucky,
Yeah.
which is great, but it doesn't mean you knew it would happen.
So it's the difference between like a lucky guess and actually knowing something. Okay, that's a great example.
So Gettier really, he didn't destroy Plato's model,
Right.
but he showed us that it needed some work.
Some tweaking.
Yeah, he was like, hey, there's this other thing you got to think about.
This whole epistemic luck thing.
Yeah.
So that adds a whole new layer of complexity to how we define knowledge.
I does.
So Gettier kind of like, he threw this curveball into the whole philosophy of knowledge.
Philosophers, they love a good challenge.
Yeah, I guess so.
So how do we fix this?
Yeah, like how do they try to fix the justified true belief model after Gettier kind of like threw this wrench into it?
Well, there were a bunch of different reactions.
Right.
And people tried to kind of refine what Plato said.
Like patch it up a bit.
Yeah, it wasn't like throwing the whole thing out, more like patching up the holes.
Right, okay.
So one approach was this idea of no false leads.
No false leads, okay.
So basically, for your justification to count, it can't be based on any falsehoods,
Okay.
even if they seem really small.
So even if my final belief turns out to be true, if there's like some flawed reasoning or some bad information somewhere in there,
Uh-huh.
then it's all tainted
Then the whole thing's no good.
and it can't be real knowledge.
Not real knowledge, yeah.
Okay, so next time I'm reading a news story,
Yeah.
I gotta ask myself, is any part of this based on like a shaky assumption or incomplete information?
You got it.
Because even a small flaw could like totally weaken the whole thing.
That's right. And that's how you apply it to your everyday life.
Oh, that's cool. But even with this approach, there are still some weaknesses, right?
Well, there's still room for those weird, gettier situations.
Those lucky coincidence situations.
Yeah, where your belief is true, but it's just by chance.
So no false leads helps, but it's not like a perfect fix.
Right, and philosophers, they came up with many other responses.
Oh, so we're going even deeper.
And we're going to get into those next.
All right, I can't wait.
It's going to be good.
Yeah?
Yeah, so just avoiding those false leads, it doesn't completely solve that problem.
Of epistemic luck.
Yeah, that epistemic luck, it's a tricky one. You can still, like, end up with a true belief, even have, like, decent justification,
Uh-huh.
but it's more like you kind of stumbled into the truth by accident.
Yeah, this is really making me realize how much we just kind of take for granted when we say, oh, I know something. There's a lot more going on under the surface.
a lot more to unpack.
So what other ways did philosophers try to, like, grapple with this whole epistemic luck problem?
So one really interesting approach is what's called the causal theory of knowledge.
It's causal theory.
And this one, it kind of shifts the focus
Okay.
from just looking at your belief and justification to, like, examining the
It's
process.
the process.
Yeah, like, how did you even get to that
Oh,
belief?
interesting. So instead of just asking, do I have good reasons for believing this?
Right.
We're now like digging into the whole backstory of how that belief even came about.
Totally.
Like, where did the information come from? How did I process it? And was there like a clear connection between that whole process and the truth?
That's exactly it. So the causal theory is basically saying for something to be like real knowledge, there needs to be this direct causal link
Okay.
between the fact that makes the belief true and the person's belief.
So it can't just be a coincidence.
It can't just be random.
It's got to be like cause and effect.
Exactly. Like, think about it, like baking a cake.
Okay.
You need the right ingredients, right? And the
Yeah.
right process to get that delicious cake.
Right.
But if a cake, like, just magically appeared on your counter,
Whew.
would you really say that you knew how to bake it?
No, not at all. I'd be like, where did this come from?
Exactly, magic cake.
So the causal theory, it's like a way to kind of weed out those instances where we might think we know something,
Mhm.
but our belief isn't really like grounded in the truth.
Right. It's not based on that real connection.
So it's like making sure our knowledge claims are built on like solid foundations.
A strong base.
Yeah, and not like a house of cards that could just totally collapse at any moment.
Exactly.
And I feel like this whole idea of tracing back that causal chain is super relevant today, especially with all the information we're bombarded with online.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's like information overload.
Yeah. Like, think about how easy it is to just stumble on something that seems true because it's presented in, like, this really convincing way.
Right, right.
But if you don't actually dig deeper and look at the source, like, where did it come from? What's the methodology?
Evidence.
Yeah, the evidence. You could just be, like, totally falling for misinformation.
Yeah, you could be getting tricked.
Yeah, it's scary. So it's like, we have to be constantly asking ourselves those questions.
You're curious, yeah.
Like, where did this information come from? Is the source reliable? You know, is there that clear connection between, like, the evidence and the claims?
Exactly. And if not, you might just be getting lucky with your beliefs, not actually, forming real knowledge.
Not the real deal.
Yeah.
So those are, like, the right questions to be asking.
The detective questions.
I gotta be a knowledge detective.
Got it.
Put on my little hat.
And the causal theory really gives us, like, a framework for thinking about those connections and evaluating how reliable our beliefs actually are in a more rigorous way.
In a smarter way.
Yeah.
But, okay, even with the causal theory, I'm sensing there might be some, like, tricky situations where it's hard to actually apply this idea, right?
Yeah, of course.
It can't be that easy.
Philosophy is all about ongoing debate and refinement, right? And one of the challenges with the causal theory is, like, how do we even define exactly what we mean by a causal connection?
Right.
Especially when you're dealing with more, like, complex or abstract ideas, it gets kind of fuzzy.
Yeah, it's not always like a simple A leads to B situation.
Right.
So the causal theory, it's helpful, but it also kind of raises new
Oh,
questions
for sure.
about how we trace those relationships and make sure they're legit.
Like, how do we know for sure?
It feels like every time we try to like really pin down knowledge, it just gets a little slippery.
That's the beauty of it. These questions, they don't always have easy answers.
Yeah,
But, wrestling with them, that's how we grow.
I guess so.
Refine our understanding of the world, maybe even become a little wiser.
A little bit of wisdom, I'll take it.
So, are you ready for the next layer of the puzzle?
I think so. Hit me with it.
Okay, so another theory that's gained a lot of traction is reliabilism.
Reliabilism. Okay.
And this one, it focuses less on the specific reasons you have for a belief
Okay.
and more on like the overall reliability of the process that got you there.
Interesting. So it's not just about having good justification. It's about whether those justifications were formed through a method that usually gets it right.
Exactly. Like, even if a broken clock tells you the right time sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't say it's a reliable way to tell time.
No, definitely not. Broken clock is broken.
Yeah. So reliabilists, they're saying, look, for a belief to count as knowledge, it has to be produced by a cognitive process.
Cognitive process. That sounds fancy.
It's just a fancy way of saying, like, how our brains form beliefs.
Okay, so how our brains work. Got it.
So it has to be a process that, like, generally leads to truth,
Not just a fluke.
not just a random lucky guess.
Okay, so that makes sense.
But then, of course, the question becomes, okay, how do we know if a process is reliable?
Yeah, that seems tough.
Right. It's tough to judge.
Yeah,
And, that's one of the big debates within reliabilism.
I
There's
bet.
no simple formula, but we can look at things like, does this method usually get it right? Is it based on solid evidence, good reasoning? Has it been, like, tested and confirmed by other people?
So it's like if I have a belief and it's just based on like a hunch or something I saw on like some random website,
Yeah.
that's probably not super reliable.
Maybe not the best source.
But if it's based on like careful observations, scientific studies,
Experts.
yeah, experts,
Mm-hmm.
then it's more likely to be reliable.
You're thinking like a reliabilist.
This is blowing my mind.
I know, it's a good one.
And, thinking about it this way, it really has implications for everything, like how we evaluate news, how we form our own opinions.
Oh, yeah, all of it.
It's like we should be constantly questioning, am I relying on trustworthy sources?
Mhm.
Are my beliefs grounded in like solid reasoning? Or am I just kind of following the crowd?
Or going with your gut.
Or just like whatever feels good in the moment?
Yeah, which sometimes can be okay.
Yeah.
But sometimes not.
This is making me rethink how I approach information entirely.
It's a shift in perspective.
Yeah, it's not just what I believe, it's how I got there.
That's the key.
Wow, I like that.
It's a challenging process for sure, but it's
Yeah.
about becoming more like aware and intentional
Yeah.
about how we understand the world.
So this whole deep dive into the Gettier problem has really opened my eyes to, like, how tricky knowledge actually is.
It's not simple.
It's not just about having true beliefs. It's about making sure they came from the right place.
The right sources, the right process.
Yeah, and they have good justifications.
You got it. And that's what makes this so relevant, to our lives.
Right.
It's not just a philosophy puzzle. It's about becoming better thinkers,
More discerning.
Yeah.
More discerning.
Better at, like, filtering out the noise.
Exactly.
And ultimately, becoming more knowledgeable.
More knowledgeable people.
So we've explored a few ways philosophers have tried to tackle the Gettier problem.
A few different approaches.
Are there any other major ones that, like, we should be aware of?
Oh, there are definitely more out there.
Okay.
Each with its own, like, nuances and complexities.
Right.
But I think the ones we've talked about today really give you a good foundation
Okay. That's it.
for understanding the core of the issue.
So we've laid the groundwork with Plato. We shook things up with Gettier.
A little bit of drama.
Yeah, a little bit of drama. And explored some key responses from philosophers.
Responses to the challenge.
But now I'm really curious, like, how does all this actually translate into practical advice for our listeners?
That's the big question, right? Yeah, how do we use these ideas to become, like, more savvy thinkers and just, like, better navigators of information in our everyday lives?
Let's get practical.
Yeah.
That's the real question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, how do we take all this heady philosophy stuff
Yeah.
and actually use it?
Right. We've been, like, deep in these theories about what makes knowledge real.
Real, true knowledge.
Yeah, but how does it translate into something, like, helpful in our everyday life?
You don't have to be a philosophy expert
Right.
to get something out of this.
Okay, good.
This whole get your problem thing and all the different ways philosophers have tried to address it, it's given us tools. Yeah,
Tools,
for navigating a world where there's just so much information.
information overload.
Yeah, some of it's reliable, some of it's not.
So it's like Plato gave us the basic idea of knowledge, then Gettier came along and was like, uh-oh, there's some holes in your theory.
Kind of shook things up.
Yeah. And then all these other theories like no false leads, causal theory, reliabilism, they're like different ways to like patch up those holes.
Make it stronger, more resilient.
Yeah. So we're less likely to fall for those like accidental right answers,
Exactly. And the cool thing is, you're probably already using some of these tools without even realizing it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but now you've got this deeper understanding of why they work, which makes you an even sharper thinker.
Okay, I like the sound of that. Sharper thinking. I'm all about it.
So, ready for some concrete examples?
Hit me with them.
All right, so think back to that causal theory we talked about.
Okay, the one about tracing back the chain of evidence.
Exactly. Asking those questions. Where did this information come from?
Yeah.
How did they get it? Is there a solid connection between what they're claiming and the evidence?
So it's not just like taking everything at face value.
No, you got to be curious, be a little skeptical, demand some proof.
I gotta get those receipts.
Exactly. And this applies to everything, like evaluating news sources, what politicians are saying, even that friend who's always sharing, those questionable facts on social media.
Oh, we all have that friend.
The one who thinks the earth is flat.
Yeah, that's the one. I feel like after this deep dive, I've got some like philosophical ammo now
Nice.
to engage in those debates a little more effectively.
I love that. But it's not about winning an argument,
Right.
It's about having those higher standards of evidence, especially with misinformation spreading so fast these days.
That makes sense, yeah.
So what about reliabilism? How do we use that?
Okay, yeah, good point.
Imagine you're using a weather app.
Okay,
You want the one that's consistently accurate.
right. Of course I don't want to get caught in the rain.
Exactly. You wouldn't trust an app that's always wrong, even if it gets lucky sometimes.
Right.
It's the same with the sources of information we rely on.
So it's not just about whether something sounds true, it's about who's saying it.
Yeah, the trustworthiness of the source.
Like, is this a reputable news outlet, a scientific study, an expert? Or is it just some random person on the internet?
Exactly. And that's where things get interesting. Because judging reliability, it's not always easy.
Yeah, there's a lot of gray area.
It takes critical thinking, media literacy, and even being aware of our own biases.
So it's like a constant process of like weighing the evidence, being open to different views, admitting when we might be wrong.
It's definitely work.
But I guess that's where the real learning happens.
That's where we grow.
The more we do it, the better we get at sifting through all the noise and finding those beliefs that are really well-founded.
That are built on something solid.
I'm seeing now how this getty your problem stuff goes way beyond just philosophy.
It connects to our everyday lives.
It's about giving us real tools to become better thinkers,
More discerning.
more knowledgeable people.
That's what it's all about.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. Thanks for guiding us through all this.
It's been my pleasure. I love talking about this stuff.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Hopefully you've got some new insights.
Some food for thought.
Yeah, and maybe a new appreciation for philosophy. So, until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
See you next time.